Hello, everybody, and welcome to the second episode of the PixelPodcast. Today we are joined with Mr. Kezcade, who I will show you in a second. He speedruns, not speedruns, he does a lot of Super Mario World ROM hacks, which we will be talking about that today. So without further ado, here is Kezcade. So welcome, Kezcade, to the podcast. How you doing?
I'm doing great. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. Thank you.
Thank
So
you. Thank you for having me on your podcast, by the way.
Yeah, no problem. So, really quickly, I forgot to mention if you want to rewatch this podcast for any reason or watch the previous episode, it's always going to be on my YouTube channel. I'm going to upload this afterwards. So let's get right
Dive
into it.
in.
So, what do you do? Like, what is a ROM hack, and what does that even mean?
So a ROM hack, um, if you look at computer terminology, you look at the word ROM. Most people know what RAM is, right? RAM is what you use for memory in your computer.
Mm-hmm.
It stands for random access memory. If you look at ROM, ROM is kind of similar to that. It stands for read-only memory. And so when you look at what a ROM is, it's essentially, let's say you download like a ROM, right? Or you get a ROM legally from wherever you have a ROM that you obtained from a legal source. That
Mm-hmm.
ROM is essentially just a image file of the memory from that game. So it's essentially taking like, let's say, a screenshot of what that game is and making a file of it that you can play on another source. So a ROM hack is essentially taking that image file, we'll just call it an image file,
Okay.
and taking that image file and putting it into Photoshop and altering it in different ways. You're essentially changing memory values in the game files to do things that weren't intended originally by the developers of the game, to do other things, change palettes, change like obstacles, change just functionality of the game that wasn't originally intended. And more or less that's what a ROM hack is. It's just an altered
Yeah.
version of the game.
Okay. So let's say you get a ROM hack. Let's say you get a Super Mario World ROM hack, right?
Hmm.
How would you play the ROM hack? Is there a specific like software you need to download, a specific console you need to download? Is there any specific hardware you need in order to actual hardware to read that ROM?
So the easiest way for anyone to play a legally obtained ROM, and the way that I recommend anyone who wants to play ROM hacks does it, is to download an emulator. Emulators are created by people passionate about a console. They passionate about creating a project, and there's a lot of emulators out there for various systems. They exist for NES, Super Nintendo, PlayStation. They're all over the place, and that the easiest way to play any ROM is through an emulator. An emulator is a piece of software that tries to replicate hardware using your computer to play a game. Um,
So do
more,
you,
it's
oh, sorry.
Go on. No, you
So
go on.
do you use an emulator to play your ROM hacks, or do you use something else? Because I know
You,
I think at least there's a EverDrive or something that you can play on an actual NES. You can play the actual ROM on the NES. I don't know if that's true or not though. If you do that.
yes. So if you're talking me specifically, I
Mm-hmm.
play on an original Super Nintendo that's been modified. It So I play on an original Super Nintendo using essentially a flash cart called the SD to SNES Pro, which is now called the FX Pack,
Mm-hmm.
um, to play as close to hardware as I can. Well, it is the hardware.
Yeah.
So that's what I play on. And there's various ways that people who are interested in playing specifically, well, since we're talking Mario, we can say any or Super Nintendo ROMs. Um, you can play on emulator, which is the easiest and cheapest because it's free. Um, there's the other end of the extreme, which is me, where I have a Super Nintendo with a like essentially an EverDrive, a flash cart,
Yeah.
and like converters to like make it work on the screen.
So
And then
basically, all it is that you have a modified SNES, and basically you can take like a flash drive or a USB or whatever, and basically plug it into your NES, SNES, sorry, so that you can play the modified ROM on your SNES, like in
to be
simple
more
terms, right?
Yeah, to be more
Okay.
specific, the Super Nintendo is not modified in a way that makes it so it can accept like the ROM files. The ROMs are
Mm-hmm.
played on the Evercard. When I say modified, I just meant to make it so it's able to output at a better video quality than it normally would be able to. Um,
Okay.
But in between those two options, there are other options for people who are interested. There's a product called the Analog Super NT, which a lot of people recommend. It's essentially emulation in a hardware box, more or less. It's hardware that emulates the Super Nintendo, and it's about as close as you can get to hardware while also still emulating. It's very accurate, and it's the cheapest, and it has HDMI output. And since most televisions nowadays are HDMI, it's the easiest way to play uh, Super Nintendo games on what you probably have at home without really
Hmm.
throwing a ton of money, or as much as you might in other ways. So those are essentially like the three main ways. And for people just getting into the hobby, I always recommend just getting an emulator. They're free, they're
Hmm.
legal,
Yeah.
and getting a legally obtained ROM and playing that and just giving it a shot. You know, there's lots of ways to play, and you don't have to spend money, but you
So let's
can
get
if you
in.
want to.
Yeah. So let's get into some, I guess, personal questions. So
Okay,
obviously, you do a lot of Super Mario World ROM hacks on the
right,
SNES, but what
right.
got you into them? So, when did it all start, basically?
So I started with Kaizo Mario World ROM hacks the
Hmm.
same time that a lot of people in the last couple of years have. So I started playing February 2019, so almost a year and a half more or less. And my story is I had been watching them for a while. I had watched speedruns at GDQs. I had followed and been watching off and on various streamers, ones that people probably know, like Grand Pooh Bear. Everyone knows Grand Pooh Bear. He's
Yeah.
a very well known Mario Brothers 3 speedrunner. He's been at GDQs. He's done Kaizos at GDQs, and uh, people more. I've watched people more or less like that for a while prior to starting. And my start with Kaizo specifically started with the release of a very, 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 very well known ROM hack. Um, if you're familiar with Kaizo, you're probably familiar with this ROM hack called
Hmm.
Grand Poo World 2, which was created by another streamer and Kaizo player, Barber's King, who is also a very,
Yeah.
you're probably familiar with them. Most people in the community are. That was
Hmm.
created for his friend Grand Pooh Bear, and the release of that ROM hack was like, it was massive. There were Kaizo players on the front page of Twitch playing this Super Nintendo ROM hack, with thousands and thousands and thousands of viewers. And after watching Kaizo for a while, I was watching Grand Pooh Bear specifically playing the hack that was made for him, and I was just in awe of like, man, this is really like incredible platforming. This is so interesting, and I had always known that I was like a pretty good platform player, but watching Kaizo, it was so scary to see that I didn't think I could do it. And then I was watching him like maybe like a week or two after the release of that game, which came out sometime in early February 2019. And he was responding to someone in chat asking that these games look so tough. Like, I don't know if I can play it. How do I do
Hmm.
it? And I remember his answer very vividly because it's what made me feel like I can do it. And he just kind of looked at his camera and just kind of stopped. He's like, just try it, just do it.
Hmm.
It's like you might surprise yourself. Like it looks hard,
Yeah.
but you don't know till you give it a shot. And after watching people play through that game for that couple weeks and realizing that there was way more to this, there was a massive puzzle in the game that was required to get to the true ending and all this other stuff. It was really interesting to me, and I was like, you know what? I think he's right. I'm gonna give it a shot. So I got on
Hmm.
an emulator and I downloaded a easy tutorial hack, and that was it. That's when I started. So
Nice. So I know, I don't know if not people, a lot of people know this, but I know this because I've been on your streams a lot. That
mhm.
I've only seen you done Super Mario World ROM hacks, and
Right.
I'm pretty sure there are other ROM hacks for like Super Mario Bros. One style, Super Mario Bros. Three. Um, so why do you choose to do Super Mario World? Is it the play style? Is it the availability of the games? Like why that over all the other possible ideas or possible game mechanics? I guess.
That's a great question. And it's pretty interesting to talk about. Super Mario World is a very interesting game. That it how do I describe this? Super Mario World has a lot of mechanics to it that weren't intended, or if they were intended, they weren't really used in a way that we use them now. Um, so if you look at Super Mario Brothers, and I know you're very familiar with these games because I've seen your Mario
Yes.
hours and you're very good at them.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Thank you.
but if you look at like Mario Brothers 1 compared to Mario Brothers 3,
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure you would agree with me that there's less that you can really do in terms of like different techniques, right? Like
Yeah, for
obviously
sure.
you can get like speed and you can jump and do all this stuff, but then you compare
Mm-hmm.
it to like Mario World where there's spin jumping, there's
Yeah.
cape, and there's various
There's also
power
P
ups.
speed. I know P speed
Yeah,
is used a lot in Super Mario World ROM hacks. Like you need to keep P speed, or else uh, this Koopa shell kills you if you don't go fast enough, or you can't make this jump if you don't have P speed. I know that's also a really
right,
really big component. Yep.
right. So there are ROM hacks of Mario Brothers 1, Mario Brothers 2, Mario Brothers
Mm-hmm.
3. There's Kaizo ROM hacks of Mario Brothers 3. I've played them. They're interesting. Um, all of these hacks have, or all these games have hacks that are made for them. They're interesting and they're all unique in their own different ways. But Super Mario World has a lot of depth that was never expanded on in the original release. From this point on, we'll just refer to the original release or original mechanics as vanilla. In the
Mm-hmm.
community, we refer to stuff that was in the original game as vanilla. Um, there's a lot of stuff that existed but wasn't really expanded on. And over the years, people have been able to find ways to use those that create a really interesting platforming experience. Some of the things that people don't really know about Super Mario World is that some of the physics in the game involve like fast falling and slow falling, which you don't really see in some other platformers. So if you're holding your jump in Mario World, you'll descend slower, and if you let go of it, you'll fall faster. And that dynamic alone creates a really interesting platforming experience that you can't get in other platformers. And it's one of the reasons that the term regrab has um, been coined into existence. And regrabbing, and I'll explain that in a second for people who don't know, regrabbing is essentially the core of Super Mario World Kaizo ROM hacks. Without regrabbing, it wouldn't really exist in the way that we know it. So a regrab is essentially a controlled jump. So if you have a jump and you hold, this might be kind of difficult to explain, so I'll do my
Mm-hmm.
best. But if you have
Yeah.
a jump and you hold your jump, you hit the jump button, you jump at max height, and then at some point your maximum height's reached, and then you'll descend. You'll start your descent, just like any jump in any game. In Mario World, if you hit the jump button and you go up, let's say you go up 60% of your height and you let go of that jump button, but then you immediately press it again, Mario will um, maintain his height that he's reached, but instead of going up any further, he'll lock himself to that essentially that height, but he'll continue his forward momentum trajectory as if he was still doing the same jump. So it's a way to get lower jumps while getting more distance. And because of that alone, that introduces a lot of really interesting um, platforming experience you can't get in Mario 3, you can't get in Mario 2. Along with that, Mario World 3 has a lot of really interesting underwater mechanics that you don't get in other games, and even like Mario Maker, you don't get it. Where Mario World swimming is actually very in depth. It has the ability to swim up very fast. You have the ability to hold down, which gives you a very small um, increases in your swim height, which lets you have very precise movement that you don't get in a lot of platformers. Combined with the fact with spin jumping, allowing you to jump on saws and do other things like spin jumping on a shell, slows your descent enough for you to be able to kind of stop a little bit while also going forward. There's a lot of really interesting mechanics to Super Mario World that were never really used. And over the last 10 years, people have found ways to manipulate them to create this very interesting experience. And it's really difficult for me to really like capitalize and explain all of it, but
Mm-hmm.
it's something really unique that I haven't really seen in a lot of other games, even other Mario games. They just don't have it the way that Mario World does, and it's created this very unique experience that incredibly enjoyable. So
Yeah, like I've only done Super Mario World 11 exit because that's what I speedrun. But I
Right.
know there are very little, maybe even no levels that like really require you to spin jump at all. Um, Regrab, obviously that's a pretty hard technique, so the vanilla game doesn't really expect you to do that. And
Yeah.
also, there's a lot of falling levels where like you have to maintain your speed and do some fancy stuff while you're falling. And I don't think Super
Hmm.
Mario World, at least vanilla, does like any of that. So,
No,
which
for
is
the most
crazy.
part, it kind of avoids that, and it wasn't
Yeah.
until later when people started to really do this kind of stuff.
Hmm.
And it's only been the last like 10 years, maybe even like we can even say 5 years realistically, 5, 6, 7 years that people have really started to like
So
discover
there's
and work with
yep.
this.
So there's a lot of cool mechanics and stuff that people have like created with ROM hacks, whatever. But how do you choose which ROM hack to pick? You know, there's probably hundreds, maybe even thousands out there that are really really enjoyable. So how do you pick one to choose or to play? Sorry.
Thousands that are enjoyable are a bit maybe
Yeah.
maybe less than that, but
Hmm.
so that's actually a good question because as a new player, it can be really difficult to really figure out what to play and what's worth playing. Because I'll tell you this right now, there's a lot of them that aren't worth playing, especially older ones. If you start to go back even 4 years ago, 4+ years ago, some of them just aren't worth playing, and so it can be difficult to figure out what to play. I know I had that issue when I first started. Um,
Hmm.
Fortunately, people who are starting nowadays have a really good thing happening. The golden age of Super Mario World Kaizo ROM hacks has really started happening like within the last couple years, and there have been a lot of really good, easier beginner hacks coming out. So, um, to the thing for people to be able to find these, um, a lot of it does come down to word of mouth and asking the community. If you
Hmm.
go onto the main website, so the main website where you get ROM hacks for Super Mario World is smwcentral.net. It's the place everyone will recommend you. It's where I recommend you go to check it out. You can check it out right now and take a look. Um, the best way as a beginner is to ask someone to go into the community. The Super Mario World Kaizo community is incredibly nice and they're incredibly helpful, and it's the greatest community I've ever experienced in my life. Um, but you should ask um, and see as a beginner what suits your skill level. There are people out there who keep um, spreadsheets of the games that they've played, the ROM hacks. I'm one of them. And there's a lot of people who keep spreadsheets of the games they've played, the difficulty that they think they are, if they're worth playing. And looking through those spreadsheets is a good way to gauge difficulty. There's not a lot of like video content out there to really explain stuff, but a very prominent player, Noble Tofu, has a YouTube video where he kind of talks about what he recommends as like the starting point for beginner players, which he calls QQ aids. And
Hmm.
QQ aids stands for a series of ROM hacks. He recommends Quickie World 2 or Quickie World 1, depending, and then from there, Akogari Mario World, Invictus, and so on and so forth as a progression step. There are various learning hacks out there. There's a hack called Learn to Kaizo. There's Pangaea Panga created a ROM hack in the last year called Kaizo Kindergarten, which I don't recommend you immediately start up, but like eventually. Um, but honestly, the best way to figure out what to play is to ask people, ask other streamers, ask other players because they know they've been there. It's actually very difficult if you go onto the main website for ROMs to know what a beginner hack is. And we might talk about that in a minute, like the categorization of ROM hacks. But honestly, just ask. You can ask me. You can go into literally probably any stream and ask, I'm a beginner, what should I play? And people will probably tell you 90% the same thing um, because we've all been there. So that's
Hmm.
what I recommend the most, anyways.
So out of all like the hacks that have been uploaded to Super Mario World Central, or
Mhm.
maybe just anywhere, are there any like really well-known hacks that either haven't been beaten by anyone yet, or have only been beaten by a few people? Because I know there are some really really hard Kaizo levels or Kaizo games, especially out there, that haven't
Hmm.
been beaten or have only been beaten by a few people. So do you know the names of those, or like how those how hard are they really?
Off the top of my head, I can name. Okay, so to have your hack placed onto smwcentral.net, it has to be moderated. You can't just place any hack. You can't just make a hack and then have it on the website. Every hack that goes through SMW Central has to be moderated, and by moderated, someone plays through your game. Um, there's I don't remember how many people are on the Kaizo team, but there's 4 or 5, and to have your hack placed on the website, it has to be beaten. If it can't be beaten, it goes into a different category of Kaizo essentially, and we can talk about that. As far as hacks that have been moderated, um, yes, I can definitely name hacks that have had like 1 or 2 people beat it. More specifically, recently, a couple people have been trying to play this game called Responsible World. More specifically, they're trying to play the original release of the game, which people call Responsible World 1.0, which is considered probably the hardest real-time possible Kaizo hack because it was made very poorly and with a lot of inconsiderate things for the player, lack of checkpoints, overly long sections, and as far as I know, only 1 or 2 people have beaten it. Um, with another one currently working on it right now. So there are hacks like that. There are hacks that you can find not on SMW Central. There's a I don't remember the name of the web. There's another ROM site that has some Kaizo hacks, and you can occasionally find stuff that other creators have made that they haven't uploaded anywhere, specifically because they don't want other people. They don't want the general public playing it because it's too hard, and they want it for people specifically looking out for that stuff. One creator that I can think of right off the top of my head is Glitchcat7, who you probably know as like he runs Super Mario World. He's a Tetris, we call a speedrunner. Like he plays a lot of games. He's incredibly good, incredibly talented, and incredibly nice. He has a website where he places stuff that he's created that you have to specifically go out and look for. He has things called he has a game that is very well known in the Kaiser community called the Search for Salmon. And the Search for Salmon is a 11, we call them exits, but we can just call them levels. 11 level ROM hack for Kaizo Mario World that uh, the story of the game is that his cat Malo, he has a cat that he has on stream called Malo, is looking for some salmon, and he keeps track of the number of people who have beaten that hack. And anytime someone beats that hack, he gives his cat in real life salmon treat in honor of them. Currently, only 16 people that I know of have beaten it. It's incredibly tight, incredibly brutal, very precise. So there are a lot of hacks that exist that
Mm-hmm.
very few people can realistically beat without the skill. There's a hack created by the Wild Grim called Shellscape, which is a very long shell-oriented hack. I don't know how many people have beaten it, but I can't imagine it's more than 8 or 10. You know, so
Wow.
those kind of hacks exist. But for the most part, a lot of hacks that you run into, especially ones being made nowadays, are intended for people to be able to beat, even if it takes a little bit of time. So hacks that are really difficult and only a few people have beaten exist. To be on SMW Central, you've had to have been beaten at least once. Otherwise, it gets thrown into a different category.
Mm-hmm.
So more or less
So
that, yeah.
So we've been talking a lot about Super Mario World Kaizo ROM
Hmm.
hacks, but are there any other types of ROM hacks that are on SMW Central or maybe somewhere else, like platforming or like maybe a story that's being told throughout the levels?
Yeah, and that actually is a perfect segue from me talking about the categories
Mm-hmm.
and how if your Kaizo hack can't be beaten, it has a different category. So there are actually multiple categories on SMW Central for various Super Mario World ROM hacks. If
Mm-hmm.
you were to go to the website right, I have it up right now too. If you were to go to the website and click on SMW hacks and you filter the results, there are 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 different categories of ROM hack essentially. And while there's a little bit of contention in the community right now about if these are the correct terminology to use for some of these, for Kaizo specifically, there are people like there's another very well known Kaizo player named Dode who speedruns at GDQ, and he's very well known, who's a moderator for SNW Central, who thinks that the category should be renamed. More or less, this is what we have right now. So there's three categories of Super Mario World ROM hacks, and in those three categories, there's different like subcategories. So the most popular category for a Mario World ROM hack is the standard category, and standard is non-Kaizo. It's a platformer. It's what you could expect from Nintendo. Um, and in that category, it breaks down into four difficulty levels. So there's standard easy, which is just, Super Mario World, maybe easier than Mario World, who knows? Actually, probably easier than Mario World. There's standard normal, which is closer to vanilla. If you want to play a Mario World ROM hack, but you're not interested in Kaizo, and you want something more traditional, standard easy or standard normal are what you want. They're what you would expect like Nintendo or someone to make.
Mm-hmm.
And then from there you have standard hard and standard very hard. I'm pretty sure those are self-explanatory. Um,
Yeah.
Standard very hard is very hard, and I would say oftentimes more difficult than a hard Kaizo hack. They're pretty intense. And then Kaizo's where it gets a bit interesting. I'll skip that for a second. There's one more category, just miscellaneous, which are for like troll hacks. If you've played Mario Maker, you're probably familiar with troll levels.
Yeah,
That's what
definitely.
those are. They're probably a bit more brutal than Mario Maker ones at times because we might talk about this in a bit. But the ability of things you can do in Mario World in the creation process is pretty intense. So there's some really good trolls in there. But more specifically, what I know the best is the Kaizo category because that's what I mostly play on stream. That's what I mostly play on my off time.
Mm-hmm.
And this is the one that's a little difficult for people to like understand, especially when they first look at it because it doesn't make any sense. So there's the Kaizo category, and in Kaizo there's Kaizo Light, Kaizo Hard, and Kaizo Pit. And most people would look at that and be like, Kaizo Light are the easier Kaizo hacks, and Kaizo Hard are the harder ones. I think that makes the most logical sense, but that's
Yeah.
incorrect. Um, Kaizo Light are Kaizo hacks of any difficulty that are intended to be played RTA uh, in real time without save states. They're games that a human can beat without save states, essentially. If you can beat it in real time, you watch a streamer play through a game, no cheating, that's what a Kaizo Light hack is. A Kaizo Hard is intended to be used with save states. It's not really recommended to play RTA. Want to use save states or maybe some kind of slowdown to like give you an advantage. They're very difficult and not intended for like a human to play without some kind of help. Most people avoid those. They're not really recommended to play unless you really want a challenge. And then finally is Kaizo Pit. Kaizo Pit is not meant to be played RTA. You won't beat it. It's mostly for people to do task stuff or for players to use extreme cheats like massive slowdown, massive lag, anything to get them an advantage. They're really not meant for human consumption,
Mm-hmm.
basically. So that's that's if you were to go on SNW Central right now, you would probably want to look at Kaizo Light. And if you're not interested in Kaizo Light, you can look at one of the standard categories, and that's the best way to explain that.
Mm-hmm.
You were talking about that.
So I have a question. So what's the difference between um, a hard, or I guess like a kind of hardish Kaizo hack and a really hard like normal hack? Like how can you have a really hard normal hack and it not be considered Kaizo? Is there some
So
like a specific thing that needs to be added for a normal one for it to be Kaizo?
yeah, so Kaizo, it's difficult to explain, but when the way I usually say it is Kaizo's difficult to explain, but when I see Kaizo, I know it's Kaizo.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Um, Kaizo, actually, this is a good opportunity to kind of talk about like the history of Kaizo real quick, to kind of give like an idea of why Kaizo exists and why it's called Kaizo before we even get into this. Um, so Kaizo originally started in 2007. There was a ROM hack called Kaizo Mario World, created by a Japanese player named T Takamoto. We don't know what their first name is. We have no idea who they are. They just made this hack. Uh, we still don't know who they are. They could be anyone. They could be you, for all I know.
Maybe.
Um, yeah, it could be. It could be me. You never know. Um, so they created this ROM hack called Kaizo Mario World for their friend Arkiba. We don't know who they are either. But they created this very strange ROM hack they wanted them to play through this Mario World and beat it. And when you pop it open, it looks like Mario World. Like the world map is the same, the level, like the paths you take on the world map to go to the levels are the same, but when you open it, it's very different. Everything's been changed and everything's hard and different. And the creator's intent was to have their friend try to beat this game in a very specific way. There were no multiple paths. There are no power ups that helped you. Like you couldn't get a mushroom. And be like, oh, I can take a hit here and it's fine. I can keep going. Like there's none of that. It's like you have to do this perfectly or you're dead. And it was kind of like a joke, like, haha, beat this, friend. Like I made this for you, right?
Mhm.
And that was in 2007. And they ended up making a couple more. They made Kaizo Mario World 2 next year, and then Kaizo Mario World 3 in 2012, um, which they got progressively harder. And Kaizo Mario World 3 is considered it's something. It's got a final boss. It's something. But
Mhm.
that's kind of where Kaizo originates from. Was from these games where the intention was to get from the beginning to the end in a very specific way, without any alteration from that path, and that's what makes Kaizo Kaizo. It's um, from the start of the level to the end goal, there's only one way to do it. And if you do it any other way, you're dead. If you make any mistake, you're dead. Right? You have to do it perfectly, and that involves a lot of learning and having a gut instinct of how to get about it. If you look at a standard Mario World hack, they're much different. Um, Usually there's multiple ways to do things. You can get power ups, you can farm power
Mhm.
ups, you can go back in previous levels, get a cape, for example, take it to a later level, and just fly over the level if you really wanted to. Now, the thing that makes very harder, some often harder than a Kaizo hack, is the way that the levels are presented. Kaizo hacks tend to, they can be brutal, but they have checkpoints. If the creator's kind, they won't make each section too overly long. There's expectations and there's realistic expectations of what we're trying to do. Standard, very hard hacks and some of the hardest ones, and I'll use Hyper 6 as an example. If you want to see a very difficult standard hack, look up Hyper 6. It's a Mario World ROM hack. I don't remember when it came out. The first speedrun of it ever, 100% speedrun of it ever happening was in the last month, and it took uh, almost 10 hours.
Oh wow.
Um, it's a lot of exits. Levels are very long, very few checkpoints, very punishing, very little time to like really breathe. Um, it, it's a little hard to explain, I guess, even after talking about it, but very hard hacks, very hard standard hacks have a level of unfairness to them often that you don't get in Kaizo, even though Kaizo is unfair and by nature it's supposed to be a little unfair. But standard very hard, like lures you into a false expectation before it says, okay, by the way, you're not beating this. You can have a power up, you can have a cape, it doesn't matter. This is going to be very long, and if you make too many mistakes, oh boy, you're going to the back, and that's going to be another 10 minutes of your time. So, um, it's hard to tell, but just look up Hyper 6 and you can probably see what I mean. So,
So from the original Kaizo in 2007 to a
mhm,
Kaizo hack that's made a week ago, let's say, how
mhm.
has the community evolved and like the actual Kaizo, I guess, style evolved since 2007? Has it evolved at all, or has it mostly stayed the same?
Oh, it's changed dramatically. Kaizo hacks made in the last year don't look like anything from 2007 or even 2015. Um, I would say that Kaizo didn't really start picking up. It kind of there were hacks made prior to 2015. The 2015 was like the first like really big Kaizo hack since Kaizo Mario World series, and that was from Pangaea Panga, which you probably have heard his name at least, who
Mm-hmm.
created the game Super Dram World, a game dedicated to Dram55, who is a speedrunner. And that was a game that was Kaizo Mario World esque, but a little bit more fair. And that was kind of like the first big modern ROM hack that kind of got like people involved. Um, and in the last 5 years, uh, and granted, I've only been playing for a year and a half, right? But I've
Mm-hmm.
seen, I've played, I've
Yeah.
watched, and the general design philosophy between 2015 and 2020 has shifted dramatically. So in 2015, you would see a game like Super Dram World where Panga has Kaizo blocks littered everywhere. And if you're not familiar with what a Kaizo block is, you know how in like Mario, like a lot of Mario games, they have invisible blocks that you can hit and use them to like find hidden power ups or to um, platform in different ways. Like you hit a block that's you can't see it, but then you hit the space where the block is, and now it's visible. A Kaizo block is that, except it's always placed in a place where you're not expecting it, and if you hit it, you're dead. Right?
Mm-hmm. I
Often it'll
know.
be like,
Oh, yeah. Sorry, I know it's used a lot in also Super Mario Maker 2, where it'll be
mhm,
like a one jump level, and it'll look really, really easy, and then you'll try to jump, but then you'll hit your head on an invisible block, and then you'll fall in the void and die.
right,
Yeah, which.
exactly. Mario
Mm-hmm.
Mario Maker uses those a lot too. They're
Yeah.
always placed in very inopportune, annoying places,
Mm-hmm.
and if you hit them, you're dead. Even if you don't die immediately, you're dead.
Mm-hmm.
And so you look at the original release of Dram World, and there's tons of Kaizo blocks like everywhere. I think one level alone has like 30 or 60
Oh
at
wow.
least. You know, it's brutal, and you can't see them.
Mm-hmm.
And the the actual like level design philosophy has changed a lot. You look at older ROM hacks, and a lot of them were very slow paced. The original Kaizo Mario World was not actually a very fast game. A lot of obstacles, you kind of had a second to like take a breath and look at your obstacle and really think about it before you made a jump, maybe over like uh, a football chuck or over a Koopa or something. You had some time to like breathe and think about it. Modern Kaizo design has sped up significantly in the last years. Oftentimes, a lot of level is like you have to be just going, going, going. If you take a moment to breathe, you've probably missed the next obstacle.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of things are timed. A lot of things are cycle based. Um, you do still see obstacles where you have a moment to breathe, and people still do create games that are a little bit slower in nature. But more often than not, um, a modern Kaizo hack is very fast. You have to do a shell jump right now. You have to immediately do the shell jump, jump over this obstacle, fast fall, because if you slow fall, you won't make the cycle to the platform before it disappears because you have to get on that platform because another shell is falling, you grab that, and there's a saw
Yeah.
blade coming, and you have to spin jump on that. Like everything's very fast, cycle based, um, to keep you constantly moving. Um, Oftentimes, they'll put something in the beginning to force you to go because if you wait at the very beginning of the level, you might die because they want you to go. Because if you don't go immediately, it might break the level or something. So modern Kaizo design has gotten very fast. Um, they've also kind of moved away from uh, like how do I explain this? Um, Modern Kaizo design has also moved a bit more away from typical vanilla stereotypes that you might see in older ROM hacks. And by that, what I mean is, over the last couple of years, there's been a lot of development in making custom stuff for Super Mario World. People create new things to put into the game, which we refer to as chocolate, and that's why the original game and we refer to as vanilla. There are people who write code and basically rewrite the code of Super Mario to create custom blocks, custom graphics, custom mechanics, like the
Mm-hmm.
ability to let you double jump, the ability to let you change what kind of jump you have in midair, which is called motor skills. You know, you can jump, and then while you're in the air, you can change it to a spin jump. You can have custom blocks that, like, when you land on them, propel you upwards. And because of all of the creative things that have been created by other people, modern Kaizo, not every hack is like that. There are still people who try to create a more traditional experience. But a lot of people create things that are referred to as chocolate Kaizo hacks, which have mechanics that we've never seen before, or we have seen before, but they're used in different ways, like double jumps, custom blocks, all these kind of things. And that's something that you see far more often in a modern hack than you would have 3 or 4 years ago. Um, so going into a hack, you actually don't really know what you can expect half the time. Versus 5 years ago, you'd be like, okay, well, this is probably the kind of stuff we might see. You might be 5, 6, 7 levels into a level, and all of a sudden, there's a mechanic you've never seen before, and that's happening constantly because there's so many people creating for Super Mario World that every hack coming out is like a new experience that maybe you've never seen this before, and it's really interesting. So,
So speaking of like, we were just talking about how, or I guess you were just talking about how new Kaizo hacks are really hard with, cycles that you have to make or else you die or something like that. So
mhm,
when you load up a new ROM hack, um,
mhm,
it's called going into a blind for anyone who doesn't know. If you've never seen the game be played before, it's called blind. So let's say you buy Pokemon and you've never seen Pokemon before, you've never played it before, just called going into a blind. So when you go into a blind Super Mario World ROM hack, how do you like start? Like I know in a lot of hacks, you basically have to move or you die. So you start up a level and then you die. So where do you go from there? How do you start a new level or a new game?
mhm. I mean, I usually, so for me, I turn on my Super Nintendo, which is usually the first step,
Hmm.
because that helps power my Super Nintendo on, and then I pick the game, and then I start to play it. But more specifically, I guess, uh, what I usually do is when I'm going to play a game blind, oftentimes, um, I'd still kind of want to know something about it, like who the creator is. The community is close enough that you kind of get a sense of if this person made this, you'll probably like it and you can probably expect this
Hmm.
versus who is if do I know this creator? No. So you go in a bit more like cautious with what you can expect. Like if I go into a Barber's King hack, I have an idea of what I'm doing and or what I'm about to get into. So my blind experience is like, okay, this is what I can do. But when I first start off the hack, usually uh, a lot of people do this. They skip the Yoshi house, but oftentimes you do want to go in the Yoshi house because there's often tutorials in a Yoshi house in a hack that has a lot of custom mechanics in it. Because
Hmm.
there are so many custom mechanics in Mario World now that you kind of do need a tutorial to see what does this block mean, and that's a good thing to check. And then from there, like I don't know, just go in and play the level. You're gonna die. You will die immediately unless it's an easy hack. There are hacks that I will put on blind, never seen it before, and I will one shot the first level because it's an easy hack. And they exist. But if you put in a hack that's like remotely hard, just be aware you're going to die probably immediately, and that's okay.
Hmm.
And you'll learn from there. All Kaizo really is, it's the process of learning and overcoming a challenge. And if you go into any hack understanding that, you're gonna have a much better time than someone who feels like, oh, I'm really good at playing Mario World. I can beat this. It's like, no, just know you're gonna die and just have fun and go in with that expectation. And anytime
Hmm.
I turn on a hack, I remind myself I'm probably gonna get stuck somewhere. I've been playing for a long time now, and I'm probably gonna get stuck, and that's okay. And that's just how you have to start every hack that you do with that thought process. So,
And I think it's kind of like a YouTube creator or Super Mario Maker 2 creator. If you're watching your favorite YouTuber, you kind of know what to expect. But if you see
hmm
a video and you're like, I don't know who this guy is, you don't really know what to expect. So you kind of go in cautiously and you kind of see what it's about and see if you want to play the hack more, watch the YouTube video more, and maybe check
right,
out their whole channel or their whole page and maybe other hacks that they've
right,
created. So
right.
yeah.
And the
So
more, oh, and one more thing, real quick. The more
mhm,
you play Kaizo, the more you kind of pick up on things. And if you play the first level and it feels a certain way, after you have enough experience, you kind of get an idea for what the rest of the hack is going to be like. And
mhm,
there have been times that I just shut a hack off because I played one level. I'm like, you know what? I know where this is going.
mhm.
This is okay. So it's okay to do that too.
If you were to boot up like a hack and the first level, you basically get Kaizoed at the very end, so you hit an invisible block and die at the very end. and you didn't really like it, would you shut it off or would you
Yes.
continue and see how the rest plays out?
If I started up a hack and I already didn't like it,
Mm-hmm.
and I've done actually I think I did this a couple weeks ago. I started up a hack. I was playing it on my own time. I wasn't streaming it. I wanted to check out this hack. I started up a level, wasn't feeling it, was not didn't think it was particularly good or well designed. I got to the very end. I hit a Kaiser block at the goal, and I hit the power button on my Super Nintendo. I was like, all right, I'm done. I'm out. I
Mm-hmm.
don't I don't care. I don't want this. So that does
Yeah.
happen. Yes.
So I guess this is a bit of a personal question, if you will. But
Mhm.
what do you think is the greatest achievement that you've done through ROM hacks or through Super Mario World ROM hacks? Is it a specific level, game, or just something that you feel like is a really, really proud moment for you, I guess?
Uh, I actually just did something in the last couple weeks that is what I consider to be one of my biggest accomplishments.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and it's something that if you were to say what I'm about to say to anyone who doesn't know, they would look at you questionably and wonder why you're saying this. Um, but a couple weeks ago, I beat a level, a very notoriously difficult level, in the ROM hack Super Dram World, which is what I mentioned earlier, the one by Panga, that came out in 2015. So Super Dram World has 19 exits, I think. So we'll just say 19 levels for ease. In Super Dram World, and for those who watch speedrunning and you're watching Pixel, you've seen speedrunning. You probably know that there's various categories of games. There's like usually like an 80% category or a 100% category.
Mm-hmm.
In Kaizo, we do use 80% and 100% to refer to like 80% is like usually all of the levels that you need to do to get to the end of the game to get the credits, but oftentimes there's 100% like, oh, there's like a special star world with like extra levels and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So in Super Dram World, I originally beat that I don't know a while ago. I don't know at this point, and I beat the 80% route to the main castle, and I skipped the special world because most people say skip special world, don't play it. It's brutal and it's not worth your time. And a couple weeks ago, I was talking to another Kaizo friend. His name's Joe Volger. You should watch him. He's very fun. Um, he decided he wanted to beat that. He's only been playing Kaizo for like 4 6 months. He's relatively newer, and it's been difficult for him, understandably, and he's been doing his best. He got to the final level, and the final level is called Dram's Butthole. And so if you were to say that to anyone not in the know, they'd be like, "What are you talking about?" But if you say that to anyone who plays Kaizo, they go, "Oh, okay, right."
Uh-huh.
They know what you're talking about and they worry about you. Um, he asked me to play the level with him because he'd been struggling, and I told him I would play it with him. So a couple weeks ago, I actually did go through the 100% route of Dram World to get to this level, and it's notoriously difficult. It's made by Panga. There's only a few Kaizo blocks, but they're in the worst possible place. It's extremely tight. You have to be on the ball. And to give an idea of how difficult this level is, I beat it in 3.5 hours, and people were like, "Wow, that was really fast." So imagine playing one single level for almost 4 hours, and people being like, "Wow, that was actually very fast." You know,
Yeah,
some people, I know people who spent 60 hours in that level, 70 hours,
that is
and
crazy. Wow.
yeah, a very good. I'm not gonna say names, but I know people who are very good now who struggled in that level for tens of 20s of 30s of hours, and
Mm-hmm.
I recently beat that, so I consider that one of my current achievements. I've beaten some very difficult hacks. I beat a hack that's notoriously known called Dark Star, which is very difficult. I beat Grand Prix World 2. My first playthrough was 18 hours, which is pretty fast. So I've played a lot of really difficult hacks, but most recently, beating Dram's Butthole was probably like one of the things I can look back and be like, yeah, this was
Mm-hmm.
something. This was an experience. So
So you just talked about how like you beat it in 3.5 hours, and people were like, "Wow, that's great," or not 3.5 hours, like one level in like 4 hours. So
We have one level in 3.5 hours. Yeah.
yeah, sorry. So how long does a usual hack, I guess, take you? Let's say it's not a ridiculous hack, right? Let's say you power on, pick out a hack, a random hack that's not too difficult, not too easy. How long does it usually take you to beat it?
It depends on how long the hack is.
Yeah,
A hack can have 5 levels in it, or it can have 25.
that's true.
And
Yeah.
depending on the difficulty, it depends. Usually, a great way to look at it is just like the average time it takes per exit or per level.
Mhm.
But it really depends because it also depends on the creator and what they do. Um, there's a creator by the name of Morsel, who's very. You say Morsel in the Kaizo community, and they know exactly what you're talking about. They know exactly
Yeah.
what kind of level is being made. They're
Uh-huh.
very obtuse. The setups are strange, and they often don't make sense. And if I was to play through a Morsel game hack, and most people say don't play Morsel blind, don't do it. Um, it could take forever. But if I play another hack of similar, let's say, difficulty, but everything's much more easy to understand, it could take like a third of the time.
Mhm.
Um, so it really depends. Most hacks, it just depends on the difficulty, the length of it. I would
Mhm.
say in the last year, no hack has taken me more than 25 hours to beat, and that's for like the harder ones.
Mhm.
Usually, easier hacks I can crank out, uh, depending on if they're really easy, half an hour. If they're like easy-ish, maybe like an hour or two. The harder hacks, like the really hard hacks, those often for even like great players can take 20 or 30 hours, depending on how many levels there are or anything. And it's kind of subjective because it depends on your skill. It depends on things that you're good at. So there are things that I'm not great at. No Kaizo player will say they're great at everything. There are things that everyone is weak to, and maybe a hack has stuff in it that I'm not so great at. So it might take some time. But on average, I would say no really hard hack has taken me more than like 20 hours on average recently.
Mhm.
Um, and usually things that are like two or like let's say we compare things out of a 1 to 5 scale, and 5 is the hardest and 3 is average. Like a 2 or 3 average level might only take like 7, 8 hours or something. So it just depends on your experience. The more you play, the faster you'll beat hacks for sure. And I just want people to know that if they go into Kaizo Mario and they download Quickie World 1 and it takes them 40, 50 hours, it's normal. Don't worry about it. Just play more and you'll
Mhm.
get better, you'll get faster, and that's just kind of how it works. So,
I know I keep comparing Super Mario World ROM hacks to Super Mario Maker 2, which we'll actually talk about in a bit. Um,
okay.
but I feel like also ROM hacks can take a long, like kind of like you're explaining. If it was really confusing, like in Super Mario Maker 2, sometimes creators will spell out like Z or whatever or something, or like a button they have to press,
Mm-hmm.
or a U to show like where you have to throw a shell or something just to make it easier.
Mm-hmm.
So if you have a ROM hack, that can be really really hard. But if it's easy to understand, like you said, if there's indicators about where you have to do a shell jump, where you have to spin jump, it can be really easy rather than dying on every single jump because you don't know what you're supposed to do until you actually learn, which is
Right.
yeah really hard. So
Right.
I think we're going to move on with the quiz, unless you want to talk about anything.
Now quiz me up.
All right.
I have no
So
idea what's gonna happen, but all right. Let's
so
see
yeah, we have
if
a
I get
quiz.
all of
If
them
anyone
wrong.
wants to in chat, they can answer. We did a quiz last time.
Okay.
Um, so some of these questions I know that you know because we actually talked about them a tiny bit before, and you actually said the answers. But
Really?
we'll start with the first
Okay.
question. So the first
Okay.
question is: how many times has a Kaizo ROM hack been featured at a GDQ? So is it 5 times, 9 times, 12 times, or 15 times?
Ooh, I actually get options because
Yes.
I sure don't know.
You don't know?
Let's say 12.
It is 9. That's not
Frig.
yeah, that's not
Frig.
including any task bots either. There have been a lot of times that task bot has been featured at GDQ.
Okay.
Um, you can
I have
explain
no
task
idea.
bots actually if you want a tiny bit.
Oh, sure. A taskbot is essentially just a machine that plays. How do I say it? It basically it takes inputs and it's a way to play a game perfect, and not only perfect, but in ways unintended. So it essentially reads inputs that you put into the software, or the device, or whatever, to recreate a player playing in a way that's not usually possible. Usually, like be able to do left and right at the same time is not possible, but using a task program, you can do it, do certain things, and it's basically a way to show like the utmost most optimal, crazy way to play a game that is not humanly possible. If a robot could do it with perfect inputs at all times and inputs that are not humanly possible, that kind of stuff. So,
It's cool. All right, so we talk a lot about Kaizo hacks and different type of Kaizo hacks, but do you know what the word Kaizo actually means? Kaizo is a word actually that comes from Japan. It's a Japanese word, but
hmm
do you know what Kaizo means? So I'll give you multiple choice. Does it mean challenging, impossible, rebuilt, or hacked?
well, it's it's more or less rebuilt.
Mm-hmm.
There's been various ways people have it can be people have said it means rearranged or rebuilt or reorganized, restructured, but essentially Kaizo is a way of saying this game has been changed in a way. So
Yeah,
it doesn't
yeah.
mean hard or impossible. It's a description of like it was modified.
So yeah, you got that one right. So this question I know you know. So when was the
Okay.
first Kaizo hack Kaizo Mario World released? 2005, 2007, 2009, or 2011?
Let me go back in the bod real quick and see what the answer was. It was 2007.
Yep,
Yeah,
2007.
2007.
Right, so the last question is I did a bit of digging on your channel, just a tiny
Ooh,
bit.
sneaky, creeping on me.
And I found the spreadsheet where you put all of your ROM hacks. So
Okay.
I want to know how well you actually knew that. So how many
Okay.
hacks have you beaten? I could
When
give you
was the
multiple
last time you
choice.
looked at that? All right, give me.
So is it 47, 56, 62, or 73?
62. I just updated it a lot, like a
Mm-hmm.
night or two ago, so I'm pretty familiar with my spreadsheet. I've beaten 62 ROM hacks in the last year and a half. The last one was garlic, and you should watch people play that because it's very interesting.
So wait, sorry, did you give your answer? If so, I couldn't hear it. Sorry.
62,
Yeah,
62.
62. Yep, that is right.
Yes.
All right, so that concludes the quiz. Couldn't think of
Hey,
any other
50%.
questions,
Wait,
but
that's
at the very end, if
75%.
anyone has any questions for Kez, he will stay a bit and you can answer them. Um,
Was that a 75 out of 100?
yeah,
3 out of
yeah,
4? I'll take it. That's passing
pretty
grade,
good.
baby.
Yeah. So we're gonna go a bit now into ROM hacks versus Super Mario Maker 2, and I know there's a lot to talk about here. We kind of
hmm
briefly talked about it earlier, but there's still a lot more because
Okay.
I've been on a lot of streamers who've been creating ROM hacks, and then people in the chat are like, "Why aren't you just playing Super Mario Maker 2?" So why are they not playing Super Mario Maker 2? Why create a ROM hack from scratch, which is significantly harder than Super Mario Maker 2?
Mario Maker's boring. To be more serious, I do like Mario Maker, and that's just kind of like a jab at it.
Mm-hmm.
But Mario Maker is very limiting. Even looking at Mario Maker 2, which greatly expanded upon Mario Maker 1's tool set capabilities, it's still very limited, and the physics of Mario World 2 aren't as interesting, in my opinion. Um, a lot of things that make Mario World interesting don't exist in Mario Maker. Like regrabbing doesn't exist.
Mm-hmm.
Jumping is different. Like just the act of jumping alone is entirely different. Swimming mechanics don't exist in Mario Maker versus Mario World. Whereas Mario World, you have a lot of precision and control with swimming. You don't really have that in Mario Maker 2. You have the frog suit now, which has opened up a lot of interesting swimming stuff, but to
Mm-hmm.
make like a traditional like Kaizo swimmer, you can't really do it in the same vein. Um, and just the tool set's limited. And I'll say this, Mario Maker is a fantastic tool for helping people get into the hobby, figure out if they like Kaizo or platforming or whatever, if they like creating. If you just want to make stuff, it's fantastic. I've made levels and I've had a great time.
Mm-hmm.
But with that said, there's only so much you can really do, and there has been a lot of creativity and ingenuity from the people who play Mario Maker. with how they use the tools that they're given. I've seen some stuff that just blows my mind. Like, how did you figure out how to do this stuff with the tools that you have? It's
Mm-hmm.
fantastic. But Super Mario World is so customizable. You can literally do anything. And I'm not even exaggerating. If there's something that you want to do, someone can make it for you and put that into the game. There is I'm gonna plug someone here real quick because I think this is important. There's a man called Deed of the Fourth, and if you enjoy Kaizo content, I highly recommend you go to Deed of the Fourth's Patreon and consider maybe dropping like $1 because
Mm-hmm.
he's not the only person who does it, but he is one of the main people who will literally just go, I will make this for you and you can use it in your ROM hack free for everyone. You
Wow.
just tell him this is what I want to make, and he's like, I can do that for you, and it's created, and he's a genius. He's been doing it for a long time. He's incredibly nice. I talk to him often, and I highly recommend that if you enjoy Kaizo content, maybe just dropping him $1 on Patreon. Um, but the act of creating a Mario World ROM hack, while it's far more difficult compared to Mario Maker, because Mario Maker you have like these tools that have been custom built by Nintendo to make it as seamless and easy as possible, right? In Mario World, you have to use a program called Lunar Magic. It's free to use. It's Windows only, but it's a program that you use to modify the Super Mario World ROM. And it's difficult. There's a high learning curve. It's essentially learning like Photoshop or Illustrator or anything like that. Um, but once you can grasp the idea of using this application in combination with other applications that people have created for creating ROM hacks for like creating custom graphics or music or anything, you can literally do anything you want as long as they can fit on the cartridge.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Super Mario World is about 500 kilobytes of data, and like if you wanted to make a ROM that was 8 megabytes, you got it. In fact, I know someone uh, by the name of Sweet Dude who's currently been working on a ROM hack called Fangs.smc, who I playtest for, who has so much created for his new hack that he's running out of space and he's having to remove things and optimize because he has
Wow.
no. I've never seen anyone run out of space, but he's running out of space because there's so much custom stuff in it. Um, so Mario Maker is fantastic for learning and for getting an idea for level design. And you get a lot of people playing it. You can have a lot of people like seeing if your level's good and if you really like it. But Mario World is so customizable with so many options. It's like it's crazy, and I see it all the time. I see people. It, this there's kind of like a circle of life that kind of happens with Mario Maker. You saw it with Mario Maker 1, you saw it with Mario Maker 2. When Mario Maker 1 came out, there was actually a resurgence in ISO ROM hacking because people got Mario Maker 1, had a really good time making stuff, and then after a while, you kind of start to feel a little stifled and not really. You have ideas and you can't really do them, and people started to move to Super Mario World after they started learning about Lunar Magic and watching people playing Kaizo, and there was a decent resurgence back then. The same thing happened with Mario Maker 2, and it's currently still happening. We're kind of like in a golden age of creators and ROM hacks right now, where after the release of Mario World or Mario Maker 2, people were super excited. I was excited. I played that a bunch. And then over time, people kind of feel like they love creating, but they can do more that they can't do in something limited like Mario Maker, so they move on. And I see it all the time. People say, "Yeah, I love Mario Maker, but I learned about Mario World, and there's so much I can do." And in fact, Barbarous King, one of the most well-known Super Mario World streamers in existence, with thousands and thousands of people, and made two of the most well-known Kaizo hacks. He made a Super Mario Brothers 3 hack too. He even said he's like, I just. He said he moved on from Mario. He still makes levels in Mario Maker, but the reason he went and made the first Grand Poo World is because he's like,
Mm-hmm.
I need more. I need more out of it. I have all these ideas, and I want to do something like really creative. So that's kind of like the main reason. The main differences between like why Mario World versus Maker. I feel like Mario Maker is a great teaching tool. It's a great stepping stone. It's a great way to find out if you enjoy it. And if you already have the game, like it's easy to do. It's easy to pick up and just make a level. It doesn't have to be anything great. You just have to do it. See if you have fun.
I also feel like Mario Maker 2 is kind of like the baby version of using like Lunar Magic or whatever. Because Lunar Magic can do like so much more. Obviously, there's a bunch of coding you can do. Basically, like you say, you can customize like anything. But I feel like Super
Hmm.
Mario Maker 2 is also nice if, like you say, you just want to create a fun little level to share with their friends or something. Or Super Mario Maker 2, since it's a official Nintendo released game, it's really easy to share and play levels rather than Super Mario World ROM hacks, which are still easy to play. But you
Right.
have to download the ROM and then play it. And if you don't like it, then you have to find another ROM. While if you don't like a level in Super Mario Maker 2, all you got to do is quit the level and find something else,
Right.
which is nice.
Right.
Yeah.
Just boot and move on.
hmm
It's very small time investment. So
So I don't know how much you know really about this because I don't think you've done it that much. But
okay.
if someone wanted to create their own ROM, maybe not even Kaizo, just Kaizo or just a ROM hack in general using Lunar Magic, where should they start? Is there a good video online or is it just kind of self-explanatory?
Um, I'll be perfectly honest. Learning how to use lunar magic is not easy. There's actually not a whole lot of content out there to learn it. There are
Mm-hmm.
videos. Barbarous King has I think it's like 3 hours of him kind of teaching like not everything, but like a plethora of things in lunar magic when he was making Grand Prix World 2. There are some other people. Dan of Most Trades has like a 3 or 4 part video series on some lunar magic stuff, and there's various videos out there. There are some um, X tutorials on SNWCentral.net's forums, but to be perfectly honest, there's actually not enough teaching stuff out there for lunar magic. So a lot of it really comes down to trial and error and talking to the community. Um, There are discords you can join, specifically smwcentral.net's Discord server, which has spots for lunar magic and ROM hacking discussion. And I know for a fact that there are creators out there that are very, very willing to help you. Sweet Dude is one of them. Sweet Dude is a great guy. He's made some of the most interesting and creative ROM hacks I've ever seen, and he's always willing to help people learn. He's always in people's streams when people will stream themselves using lunar magic, and he'll be in there like watching and giving advice and stuff. So the best way to learn lunar magic is, yeah, there are video tutorials, and yeah, they will get you a decent grasp of where to go. You kind of just have to throw yourself in and mess around and
Mm-hmm.
see what works and what doesn't. Check the forums on SMW Central. Check like SMW Central's Discord, and just ask people who make things. People stream themselves and their creative process all the time on Twitch. Um, Barbarous King himself is working on Grand Prix World 3, and I know you said earlier that you've watched him make a little bit of that.
Yeah.
Um,
Mm-hmm.
Juz Cook, who's another very well known person who's working on his sequel to Invictus, hasn't been so much, but he does sometimes. And there's all kinds of people of various like well knownness and like uh, experience in lunar magic constantly working on, and they will help you. If there's one thing that the Mario community is known for, it's being helpful. Um, they're very willing to help the community because the community is what helps them have games to play. So that's my recommendation. Check out some videos and then just make something, mess around, see what works and what doesn't, because it's going to be really confusing for a while, and it still confuses me whenever I look at it, but it just takes time.
Mm-hmm. So we've
So
we've already talked about a tiny bit about how Super Mario World ROM hacks and the whole community has evolved a lot over the past like 10-ish years. But
hmm
what do you think the future has to offer for ROM hacks? Like, do you think there's any chance that like there'll be a tutorial for Lunar Magic and a lot more people will get interested in it? or even just, I guess, the community evolving and more people joining with that all happening, what does that mean for the future? Like, what do you think it holds?
The future of Mario World ROM hacking is absolutely crazy, and I have no doubt in my mind that this is just that this isn't like the progress and everything happening. Like there's big things to come in
Mm-hmm.
the Mario World ROM hacking scene. This year alone, so if you were to look at SNW Central's Super Mario World moderated hacks, there's like 208, I think. Let's say 200. Let's just round up to 210. There's 210 ROMs on. They're not ROMs. To be more specific, it's just games. You have to patch the games yourselves to be able to play them. SMW Central doesn't host ROMs for various legal reasons, but there's 210 games, and if you were to look at the number of games uploaded, number of hacks uploaded in the last year, it's half the number of games that exist. Um, you go back to some of the original releases on SNW Central in 2014. There's like 5 or 6 games or whatever. 2016, there's a handful. Up until like a few years ago, there was like I don't know 50. I'm just putting out numbers. I don't know specifically. But in the last year and a half, has more than doubled the number of hacks that exist. People are getting way more interested in it. The Twitch community is growing every day. I'm constantly seeing new players showing up who have been watching other people for a while, um, and have kind of watched from the sidelines thinking they couldn't do it, and they decide they want to get into it. Constantly meeting new players. There's probably at least 50 hacks in development right now,
Wow.
between people creating the hacks, people creating custom music for the hacks, people creating custom graphics and assets and mechanics for hacks. There's probably 1,000 people working on ISO hacks right now, like at least. The when I said earlier that this is the golden age, like I wasn't kidding. Like the SMW Kaizo community has grown substantially in the last 3 years. Me being a part of that growth, and it's not slowing down. Dode, one of the moderators of SNW Central and also a partner on Twitch, who is trying to play through every single ISO hack on SNW Central. He's like 130-ish or so out of 210. He said he can't stop playing them because if he takes time off to speed run or do anything else, he's gonna fall behind because new hacks are coming out every single day, like
Mm-hmm.
3 or 4 a week. Like people are really into it. And it's really exciting to watch because as more people get into it, more ideas come out, and it's kind of changing like what ISO hacks can be. The bar is getting set incredibly high right now. They- They're getting like artistic and creative. There's like storytelling and like it's almost like watching like not quite a movie in terms of like motion pictures and stuff, but
Mm-hmm.
like the kind of art and like emotion you can get. I've legitimately like shed tears a couple times playing. I'm not even joking. And I know that
Mm-hmm.
sounds weird, but like
Yeah.
I've shed tears from like either my experience playing Invictus. If you go back and look at my clear videos of that, I got misty eyed because that was an experience, and it's crazy, the bar that's being set. So I'm so excited to see what happens in the next couple of years. Like,
Mm-hmm.
there's so many creative people coming out that it's nowhere even close to dying. It's just more people every day, and it's amazing to be a part of and watch.
So I heard you say that there were about like 50, I think you said, ROM hacks in development. But what does
That
that
that shit's a
mean?
rough.
Sorry, what'd you say?
Oh, I was just throwing out a rough number, but continue.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, but let's like if a ROM hack is in development, right? What does that mean? I think a lot of people underestimate how long creating a ROM hack takes or how many people really are involved with it because there's the actual creator, there's play testers, there's people who create the music, there's people who create all the artwork. So how much work actually goes into to creating one single ROM hack?
A
Like I
lot,
guess a good quality ROM hack.
a lot of work goes into it. Just thinking about the ROM hack creator themselves. So actually, before I go into that, if you go on SMW Central and you look at the like navigation bar, so there's like a link for like the hacks and whatever. If you go down, there's actually like a bunch of sections for like custom graphics, custom music, custom blocks, custom sprites, patches, various other things. There's people who just make stuff and have it moderated and uploaded to SMW Central for people to use. They just have ideas and they want to make them so people can use them. So at any given time, there are people just making things for ROM hackers to use. Maybe backgrounds for a level, custom graphics, music. People will port songs from games that they really enjoy, or a lot of people make like brand new custom never heard before music specifically for ROM hacks, right? So there's
Mm-hmm.
always people working on stuff, and just thinking about that alone is like I couldn't tell you how many people are working on them, but there's got to be like hundreds of people working on that stuff at any given time because they're just passionate about helping people make the games that they like. And taking that into consideration, then you look at the people making the actual game, and those are usually the actual creative process of designing the level. It's usually a one-person situation, um, more or less. So let's say Barber's King worked on Grand Prix World 2, working on Grand Prix World 3. He's designing the levels. He's the one who's determining what goes into the level, what custom stuff he's using, and all of that. But aside from that, at some point, these people need outside assistance for various things. The most common one is playtesters. So, something that is beneficial that you don't get in Mario Maker is that you can't really playtest in Mario Maker. You can upload a level, then have a friend play it, and then rip it down and then change it. That's a pain. Um, in Super Mario World, oftentimes the smart creators at least they'll get a lot of playtesters. I'm a playtester for various hacks, and there's a lot of people who will playtest who will go through a hack, play through it, play what's been created so far, see what's wrong, see what needs to be fixed, see what needs to be changed. Is the overworld like cut off? Is there weird things on it? Does the level feel not fun? What can be changed to make that level more fun? And that's one of the most important processes. And so, it could be like one person or it could be like a team of like 12, 15 people playtesting one hack. The more playtesting, the better, honestly. And aside from that, if you look at Grand Prix World 2, which is a great example because he was very public about 90% of his creation process. There's stuff he kept secret for very specific reasons, but he had several people like Kaizo Man, who is a person who creates custom stuff, who helped Barb create the final boss of Grand Prix World 2, the Bowser fight. And if you look up Grand Prix World 2's Bowser fight, if you've never seen it before, it's an incredible feat of gameplay. It's one of the most fun boss fights I've ever experienced. It's completely custom. It has RNG elements. It has like phases. It has all kinds of stuff, and
Wow.
he had to have someone help him create this. So I don't know how many people were exactly on his team, but you have the creator, and then oftentimes they will ask for help because not everyone is great at everything. There
Mm-hmm.
are people who are great at the coding and stuff. So there can be a lot of people involved in a single hack, dozens usually. For like the more well known ones, there can be like dozens of people between playtesters and coders and all kinds of stuff. So
So earlier as well, we went over a lot about how beginners can get started, but um, like let's say you go to SMW, or sorry, whatever the link is, I forget.
smwcentral.net.
Yeah, smwcentral.net. You find a hack, you download it, you play it on emulator, and you play a few ROM hacks. Where do you go from there? Like you start off with some really simple ones, but where do you progress? How do you progress?
So there's a couple. There's a handful of ways that people have talked about progression. I have my own very like specific ideas of how to progress in Kaizo. Some people disagree with me. Some people want to throw themselves at the absolute hardest hack possible and learn from there, which I don't recommend. I don't recommend making Grand Prix World 2 your first hack ever. You're
Yeah.
gonna have a bad time. It's
Mm-hmm.
not a good idea. People think that hack is easier than it is. It's very difficult. Um, thing that I recommend and I tell people, this is my own personal thought process, is pick an easy hack in combination with a tutorial hack. I recommend Learn to Kaizo as a tutorial hack over Kaizo Kindergarten made by Panga. As a very first hack, I do recommend you play Kaizo Kindergarten after a couple hacks, but as your first one, I don't recommend it. But
Mhm.
take Kaizo Kindergarten and in combination with something like Quickie World 1 or 2, which is considered one of the definitive starter hacks. There are hacks that are easier than it, but Quickie World 1 and 2 are considered by a lot of people to be like the definitive place to start. Um, and my recommendation, pick either one you want. Quickie World 2 is easier, but Quickie World 1, before I get into what I was going to say, this is actually kind of an interesting thing to talk about. So Quickie World 2 is easier than Quickie World 1. However, some people recommend starting with Quickie World 1 first because Quickie World 1 has a level that's notorious called Soffring Castle. It's the final level of the 80% route, and it is absolutely brutal for new players. Like, not even remotely okay. In
Mhm.
fact, the creator himself, Valdio, apologized for it because it's very difficult. It took me a weekend to beat that single level when I started out. Some
Wow.
people it takes 20, 30 hours as a new player. And some people say to start with Quickie World 1 because you need to get yourself beaten down and to feel depressed. It's funny because we're all a bit masochistic at heart. It's funny to talk about, but we like the pain, we like masochism in our games. We want to feel beaten up. You need to learn if you're okay with that because there will be times where you will be playing a level that slaughters you
Mhm.
and you are going to feel like you will never beat it and you will spend hours and hours and hours and maybe days on a single level and you need to learn very fast if you're okay with that. So while I used to recommend Quickie World 2 as a starter hack, I actually have kind of shifted recently and thinking Quickie World 1 is better, specifically for the litmus test of Sovereign Castle to see if you're okay with Kaizo, because that's what Kaizo is
Mhm.
getting beaten down until you are good enough to beat it, and going from there. And I know I've talked to some people who say that a great way for them to learn Kaizo is they will pick an easy hack, finish the easy hack, and then speed run it. I actually did that a little bit too, but I know some people who did that exclusively for a while. They beat Quickie Worlds and speed ran them for a while. The problem with that is that you only ever get good at speed running easy hacks, and you don't really progress. Because if you were to speed run Quickie World 2 and then move into a harder hack like Akogari, which is not a hard hack, but it's harder, or you go into like Grand Pool World 2, you won't succeed. Even if you have world record in Quickie World 1, you won't succeed, probably. So my recommendation is pick up Quickie World 1 or 2. Um, 1 is a great place to start, but if you want something easier, go with 2. And after you beat them, don't immediately go and just pick an easier hack or an easy hack. Try to find something the next step up. The next step up that most people recommend is a game called Akogari Mario World, made by Mega Scott. And the reason people recommend that hack, it's harder for sure. It's a bit harder than Quicker World, um, but it is such a regrab heavy hack for a beginner hack. It's not begin. It's like it's below intermediate, but it's the next step up. It's so regrab heavy, and with regrabs being so important in Mario World, that
Mhm.
if you can get through that game, you will learn regrabs well enough to be able to progress. Because if you, a lot of people have the idea that Mario World is about jumping and it's about shell jumps, and while that is true, if you can't regrab, you'll never make it in Kaizo. So
Yeah.
to go back a bit earlier, when I was talking about a player named Noble Tofu, he has a recommendation called QQ Aids, where he says to start with Quickie World 1 and 2, move to Akogari, then do Invictus, which is a step up made by Juz Cook. It's a very chocolatey hack. And then from there, go to Dram World, and then uh, Storks, which is made by Morsel. And instead of constantly living in a easy hack to make yourself feel like you're getting comfortable and whatever, constantly try to push yourself after you beat a hack. And if you feel stuck, then you can recede a little bit, find something a little bit closer to your play style, do that, and that'll help you feel more comfortable to start to move yourself up. But the sooner that you can start to feel an upwards progression and skill, the sooner you'll be able to play some of the harder hacks like Grandpa World 2, Dark Star, and eventually maybe even Search for Salmon if you have the guts for something like that. So that's what I recommend. Definitely, if you enjoy a game that you've beaten like Quickie and you want to speed run it, go for it.
Hmm.
But definitely always think about an upwards progression, and then you try out Kaizo Kindergarten and like learn some really in-depth stuff. And that's what I always tell people to go for.
There's also a whole Google Doc I think made by some people that explain basically all of this, like where you can start some good kaizos to start with and then progress with. Because yeah, like
Yeah,
you said, if you stick with one kaizo game, you can get really really good at one or two specific techniques, I guess. But if you don't learn how to shell jump, you don't learn how to regrab, there's really no point. You won't really progress at all. And
right.
you also talked about how like some levels will slaughter you, and I think a really good example of that. I think this was like a year ago. I was watching a streamer. I forget who it was, but I remember at the time it was just insane. It was basically in Vanilla Mario. If you hit a specific coin block, sometimes that will turn into a coin snake, so you can control where like the quote unquote snake of coins goes. And it was basically a vertical level, so he had to ride the snake block all the way up to the top with like boo rings and Lakitus trying to kill him. So it's hard to explain it, but it was insane. I think it took him about 10 hours to beat the whole entire level, which is crazy.
Hmm. Yeah, and
Um,
that's going to happen. You might have a
yeah.
level that takes you 20, 30 hours, and you have to be okay with that.
So we've been throwing around a lot of names and stuff. So what are a few good Kaizo or just I guess ROM runners, hacks, players, or like streamers that we can or people who want to get a part of the community can watch?
There's a lot. This is actually a really hard question because I don't want to leave anybody out.
Hmm.
Because there are a lot of good players, and there's a lot of good players who aren't very well known. So I'll give some names of people you can check out. But one thing I would recommend is if you're really interested in watching players and learning about Kaizo, go into the Super Mario World category and don't just go to the top three streamers, even though they're all very good and I recommend them all. They're all great people usually. Not you. I don't know why I said usually. They usually whatever. You know what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Um, there are some really great players who are not as well known that you should recommend, and I don't want to single anybody out because I don't want to leave anyone out and feel bad. But there are great players everywhere. If you want to watch some of the well-known players that have been around for a while, who you probably have heard their names before. Obviously, there's like Noble Tofu, Laser Belch, who are some of my favorites. They're very good. You have Dode, who has been playing since 2015. He's amazing. You have Barbarous King, who makes hacks. Grand Pooh Bear, and the legend himself, plays them. There's all kinds of players. If you want to find them, they're there. There's Glitch Cat. I can't even think of everyone off the top of my head. There's a ton of lesser known players. I could open up Twitch right now and probably like
Hmm.
see like a handful of people that you should watch.
Also,
Um,
you do a lot of hacks, so definitely. Also, I'm really sorry. I realized I forgot. I don't have your. I have your socials, but I don't have the actual icons. So if you want to
oh,
check out Kezcade, it's
it,
on
it's
Twitch, YouTube, and then Twitter. I think I
it's
have
the
it. It's
same on all
just
of them.
yeah. I think I have it actually. It's just for some reason disappeared. Yeah, there we go. So yeah, if you have
Yeah,
Twitch, YouTube, and Twitter, so definitely check them out there.
yeah. But aside from that, there's like the people that everyone knows because they're GDQs, they speedrun.
Hmm.
There's lesser known players like Mighty Mouse and Hank Sinatra and the Wild Grim, who is astounding. There's all kinds of great players, and then you look down. There's people like I don't know. I'm just scrolling down my Twitch right now. It's like I don't want to leave anyone out. Just
Hmm.
there's so many great players. There's Katoon,
Yeah.
so many people that are my friends that they're great. Just go into the Mario World category and just look for people. Most of them are really good. The ones that are still learning will be good eventually, and they're all incredibly helpful, and they want to talk to you and interact with you and help you learn and become a part of this community.
Hmm.
Um, so I recommend everyone. I it's very rare for me to run into a Kaizo player that I don't like, and I would say that you shouldn't watch
Hmm.
in some capacity. So I don't want to really like leave anyone out. So um, there's a lot of good players. Check them out.
So I think that's all we got. There might be one or two questions I'm leaving out, but I think now is a good time to move into a Q&A to close off the podcast. So if anyone watching right now has any questions for Kezcade, definitely message them in the chat. If not, we'll just close out, but if anyone has any questions, we'll wait for a few minutes.
All right, let's do it. If there's anything to talk about the old Kaizos. Does this mean you're going to give some Kaizo hacks a shot, Pixel? But Pixel, I don't know if you can hear me.
Oh, okay. Sorry. Uh,
Yeah.
Retro console video quality at all? I mean, in a way, yes. I mean, when streaming and stuff, I'd love to have the quality as good as possible, and especially while speedrunning, it's nice to have the best quality as possible. But I'm playing on a CRT TV, which does have really, really good quality, but it's nowhere near as good as an emulator. Um, but I really like it. It's nice. It feels kind of organic in a way. They're not really. I guess older games aren't really meant to be played. Pixel perfect. Pun not intended. You being able to see every single pixel, because I feel like on a CRT TV they kind of like merge together, which is in a way kind of nice. It's annoying when you're trying to do a really really hard trick, but it's nice in a way. And also, yeah, you're asking kids. I kind of assumed that, but I also wanted to answer. So yeah,
What was the question?
CritterCat is talking about you interested in retro console video quality at all?
I am. Um, to elaborate on my setup a little bit, I do not play on a CRT. I play on an HD monitor, using a piece of hardware called the OSSC, which is a scanline converter. Which, um, the main reason, there's a lot of reasons why you might want to play on a CRT and to get that kind of quality. A lot of people play on them specifically because it's the least amount of lag you could possibly have, and having as little latency as possible in a Kaizo hack is incredibly important because there are tricks that are frame perfect. That if you don't do them on the first frame, you can't do them, and so you need as much, uh, you need as little latency as possible. I play on a monitor that has 2 milliseconds of latency, and I don't have any issues. It's very very low latency, but if you can't play on a CRT, if you can play on like a monitor and get like really good video quality with as little latency as possible, you're doing fine. That's
Mm-hmm.
what a lot of people with Super NTs use. A lot of the bigger player, a lot of players actually like Laser Belch, Noble Tofu, the Wild Grim. They play on Super NTs on a monitor, and they play perfectly fine. That's very little latency. If you look at like Dode and Grand Pooh Bear, they play on CRTs with their setups, and they're very you can look up their setups and stuff, and they do that because they want as little latency as possible. And even though playing on my monitor, I have almost no latency, they have even less latency than that, and it's very important to them. So, as far as video quality goes, it really depends on what you want. If you want better video quality versus better latency and everything, but you can kind of get close to either or depending on your setup to make it pretty good. So
Do you have any lag since you're playing on a monitor or no?
no, I mean
Nice.
there is lag, of course. It's
Mm-hmm.
just inherent. Even CRTs have lag,
Yeah.
but
It's nice since it's consistent lag, so you can kind of get used to it, which is nice.
well, even on CRTs, it's such minuscule lag that it's
Yeah.
not perceptible.
Mm-hmm.
On my monitor, of course, I'm going to have more lag than a CRT, but it's it's like a thousandth of a second versus like 10,000. I can't say that word. 10,000th of a second or whatever. I'm just throwing out numbers, but
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
It's mostly imperceptible compared to like playing on like an emulator, which that's one thing that you do have to worry about if you play on an emulator or if you play on like a Super Nintendo Classic, which you can put ROM hacks on if you modify it. There is latency in those devices. If you play on an emulator, you're usually looking at like, depending on your setup, maybe like 3 or 4 frames of input delay, and all that might not matter to you as a new player. At some point, you can adjust to it, but um, with some of the things you have to do in Kaizo,
Hmm.
you kind of need as many frames to think about it as possible at times.
That also segues into last gen lad who asked, don't know if you already said this, but how do you set up these ROM hacks? So we did explain that at the very beginning of the stream, but you can explain it again if you want.
That's actually a great question because I didn't elaborate enough.
Hmm.
Because it actually can be a little confusing. Because if you go to smwcentral.net and download a file, you do not have a file that's playable. SMW Central does not host ROMs. They refuse to host ROMs for legal reasons. They only give you the file for you to patch. So this is actually a great question. So if you were to go on right now, let's say you want to download Grand Poo World 2, the way that you would actually play this game is you need a couple pieces of software. The first you need is your emulator if you're playing on emulator. The second thing you need is you need a program called it's called Flips. Let me make sure I'm not. It's called Flips, or that's short for floating IPS. You can just Google that. Just Google floating IPS or SMW Central Flips or whatever. It'll probably be the first thing that you find on there. Um, and so what you need to do, and this is very important because it's very confusing for new players. I was super confused. Um, you will have your file that you downloaded from SMW Central wherever you happen to have it. You also need a legally obtained ROM file for Super Mario World, and then you need this the software called Flips. And so what you do is you click the button where it says Apply Patch, which will then open up a file explorer browser on your computer where you select the game that you're looking to play. Let's say Grand Prix World 2. You select that. At that point, it'll then ask you what game file do you want to patch with it, um, which you would then use the Super Mario World ROM that you obtained. And then from that, it creates the playable ROM file. So you need to take those steps because they will SMW Central does not host something that's immediately playable. They won't do it. So take those steps, and then once you have done that, then you have a actual file that you can play on your emulator, and from there you just go on your emulator and load it up, and it'll work. It'll work fine.
Are these steps on SNW Central, or is it like really really hard to figure out, or is it like if you forget the steps that you just said, is there an easy way to go back and find what to do and how to play them?
I'm sure I haven't. It's been a long time. I'm
Hmm.
sure if you go to the page where this software is located, there is something about it. I think that there is actually a tutorial on SNW Central on how to patch. If
Hmm.
not, Noble Tofu on his YouTube channel actually has he has a series of videos where he talks about this kind of stuff, which he does live on his stream. And he has talked about flips and patching on his stream that you can check out and watch. Otherwise, I guess you can just watch this VOD real quick. But it's one of those things where once you do it once, it makes sense. It was
Hmm.
very confusing for me at first because I didn't really have any of that stuff. But yeah, there should be some places you can check SMW Central forums. Uh, you can Noble Tofu has some videos on YouTube. You can always just go on Twitch and go ask streamer because they've all had to do it. You can ask me. But once you do it a couple times, you'll never have to think about it again. So
We've been talking a lot about SNW and ROM hacks and whatnot, but J9 Game asked, "Do you play any other games?"
like ROM hacks are just games in general.
I'm assuming games in general.
Oh, I play a bunch of games. Um, like recently, I've been playing through the Dark Souls series on streams on Fridays because I'm trying to get to Dark Souls 3, which I've never played. So uh, I play a lot of Souls. I'm trying to get to Dark Souls 3 blind. I play a lot of. I don't play that many games in my off time anymore because I don't have time. But like I grew up loving JRPGs and like puzzle games. You know, I've
Hmm.
always loved platformers. I play a lot of Kaizo in my free time, not surprisingly. I love like Chrono Trigger and Final Fantasy VI, and I love Super Nintendo. So I actually have a very wide range of games I do enjoy. Monster Hunter, all kinds of stuff like that. So yeah, um, they were talking ROM hacks specifically. Not too many though. I've dabbled in Mario Brothers 3 ROM hacks and other stuff here or there. I actually played a Yoshi's Island Kaizo hack in the last month or two. There's only one in existence. It's
Oh
made
wow.
by Sweet Dude. It's made by Sweet Dude, the guy who I said makes incredibly unique stuff.
Mhm.
If you play his new hack, you're going to have to play his Yoshi's Island hack. I won't tell you why, but you're gonna have to do it. Um, and yeah, it was really interesting. It was hard because I don't understand Yoshi's Island physics, but yeah.
Yeah. I'm actually playing through Yoshi's Island casually now. Sometimes if I get really triggered or get really bored with speedrunning, I'll hop over to Yoshi's Island. Also,
There you
Creator Cat
go.
wanted me to mention that I actually have the middle one. So this one right here is
Mm,
that's Chrono Trigger. So Creator Cat
nice.
wanted to I guess brag that we have the game.
Yeah, I got a copy too, so we can be like Chrono Trigger buds.
Sweet.
That's
Nice.
a great one to have.
So yeah, Chrono Trigger. I know it's a bit off topic, but it is a really really good game. I haven't played it enough. It's really
Chrono
really
Trigger's
fun.
never off topic.
Yeah. Creator Cat
I
says
got
it's his favorite game
It's a
ever.
great game. I got a question for you actually because I think I
Yeah,
was
sure.
muted or something earlier. With all the talk and having me on your podcast, are you interested in maybe giving a Kaizo hack a shot in the future at any time?
Yes, I'm actually glad you asked that. I think on January 1st, I made an announcement saying like, "Oh, I'm excited for what 2020 holds." And I think I said I really wanted to try out some Super Mario World hacks. And I've always just kind of pushed it aside. Because I really didn't know where to start. I've been kind of going into the Super Mario World, I guess, community. I've been following some people and looking at that, and I do really want to start doing some Super Mario World hacks. I'm kind of scared, but
Everyone is. Don't worry about
yeah.
it.
Mhm.
Everyone's. In fact, I'll tell you a quick story before we get to the next question. Very
All
quick.
right.
When I first started trying to stream again after not really doing it for a while,
Mhm.
I kind of dabbled in Kaizo a little bit, but I was really scared that I didn't understand the community, so I was really scared to try to stream Kaizo because I thought people would say I was bad and suck and all these other kinds. So I got terrified, and I decided to play a standard hack on stream for a while instead. Um, and I did that for a while, and eventually I got bored of it because I was like, I want to play Kaizo. And so I was like, I started playing Mario Maker instead. And I just kind of like put it off for a while. And then finally I was like, screw, I'm gonna start playing Kaizo.
Mhm.
And it was the best decision I made. I was just too scared to do it because I thought people
Yeah.
would say I would suck and everything. It turns out the Kaizo Mario community is the most welcoming and warming community I've ever experienced in my life. Like,
Mhm.
no one comes into your stream and says you suck unless they're like not part of the community. They're just a troll. But
Mhm.
anyone who actually is a part of it, they will push you to succeed, and they might meme on you. They might like make fun of you,
Uh huh.
but it's because they really want to watch you succeed, and they will stay up all night to watch you beat a level you've been struggling on for 10
Yeah.
hours. So it's totally normal to be scared to try it. I was scared. And I just put on something super hard. I'm like, yeah, whatever, let's do it. So you definitely go through like phases of ISO scaredness.
I'm definitely going to join the SNW Central Discord for sure. Definitely. Like,
Do it. There's some incredibly helpful people
yeah.
on there.
I'm also scared to join or I guess start doing Kaizo hacks because I speedrun SMW 11 exit and I like to believe that I'm good at that game, but I feel like if I were to try any Kaizo hacks or just ROM hacks in general, it's just gonna show how bad I am at the game.
I'll tell you this right now. There a lot of Kaizo players look at Super Mario World speedrunners in awe
Yeah,
sometimes
it's like
because
vice versa. People are scared to start Super Mario World, and they do ROM hacks because they think it's like too hard. Some tricks are too hard, and then some people it's vice versa. They don't want to do Super Mario World ROM hacks because they think it's too hard.
yeah,
It's kind of ironic.
the best example I can give for that is Cape because cape in Kaizo hacks is actually only started to come up in the last like couple years. Before
Hmm.
that, you really didn't see cape. So once cape started to show up, people were terrified.
Yeah.
And SMW speedrunners were like, "What's the big deal? It's just cape." Not only that, it's vanilla cape, so you have to deal with like turnaround stuff.
Yeah, like
Where
I don't get that. Like I feel like that'd be so useful to know for speedrunning, and it's so confusing. I see some streamers doing some levels with cape, and it's crazy. I know some streamers even have a channel point reward that says cape sucks, because
yeah,
it's kind of like a
laser
meme at this
belch.
point.
Yeah,
Yeah,
laser
laser
belch
belch has that.
hates cape. He'll play. He's good at it, but he's like, no, cape sucks.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
and then you have like Noble Tofu who's like, no, cape is good, but only patched cape. And
Mhm.
so people, a lot of Kaizo runners look at SMW speedrunners, and they're like, these people who play unpatched cape who are gods at it, they're like, oh, yeah,
Yeah, it's
people have gotten
crazy.
better at cape in Kaizo in the last couple years, and like
Mhm.
I used to be terrified of it too. I think I'm okay at it now.
Yeah.
But that's just one thing. People were one side of the fence might look green to you, but it looks green to the other person on either
I
side.
was actually in laser stream a few days ago when I learned that by holding back and spamming the A button, you can lose speed
Hmm.
and like reduce your speed. And I was like, that's a game changer. That's like insane. It's such like
Hmm.
a. I feel like I've never read like any of the text boxes in Super Mario World, but I have a feeling that they do a really bad job explaining the cape movement. Because I've had
It
people
was
come into
never
my
explained
stream
before.
and are like, "How do you do that thing where you fly with the cape?" And like, all you have to do is press back at the right time. But the game never really explains that. You kind of just get the power up, and that's it. You know.
In before my playthrough of Grand Prix World 2, which I played at the beginning of this year, before I started that, I actually went through a like a cape boot camp where I forced myself to play a bunch of things with cape in it to learn cape. Because in Grand Prix World 2, there is an infamous cape level, uh, which a lot of people struggled with when the game came out because a lot of people weren't very good with cape, including very good Kaizo players who were like, I haven't really had to mess with cape like this before. And it involved a lot of things like slowing your movement, like using spamming back. You don't have to spam back, but holding back and like hitting the button
Yeah.
and all this other kinds of stuff. We were like, I haven't really had to do that before in Kaizo. And so
Mhm.
I actually forced myself to go through a boot camp where I played like Kaizo Kindergarten's cape and like Super Soul Sting as a hack that has cape. And just I had to learn it because it's a skill you don't really use often in Kaizo, but when it shows up, you have to know it because it's getting more involved. In fact, there's a SMW Central moderator named BK who is making a all cape hack, which is intense looking. So cape is starting to become more common, and yeah, there's a lot of techniques, like you said, like to be able to slow that I didn't know as a kid. Wasn't explained anywhere. Um, they just kind of exist, and people didn't really start using them until recently.
Okay. So yeah, if anyone else wants to ask any questions before we head off. Um, Also, thanks to Good Luck Xbox. Although I'm not doing any speedrunning, we're doing a podcast here, but
Good
appreciate it
luck on your
anyways.
podcast speed run.
Yeah, we're speedrunning the podcast. I don't know if it's gonna be a PB or not, but we'll see.
Gotta go for that gold split. Starting to get close though.
Yeah, it's crazy how much the community has grown. I've only been in it for like a year. I think the way I got into the community in the first place was I've actually told the story a few times on my channel, but I don't think you've ever heard it. So I had a
Hmm.
class last period in school that all we did was take notes, and it was really boring. And it was a fairly easy class if you took notes, whatever. So what I do is I take out my computer, I put my notes or my Google Doc on one side, and I'd watch a streamer on the other side, and it was amazing because Laser Belch always went live at 12 to 1 o'clock, and my class always started at 1 o'clock. So I basically just watched his stream during the class, and it was actually great.
Seems like a good time to me. Laser Bus is a great dude.
It was fun. Yeah, he's great.
Hmm.
Even with 15 seconds of time loss, this can still sub 17 pace.
There you go. Sub 17, we're in there, baby.
Yeah.